Welcome to another artist conversation in our series, Pathways for Dialogue, Past, Present, Future.
Thank you all for coming. So I'm joined here today with Curlee and Ify. Right. Dr. Curlee, Raven Holton, is a printmaker and painter and the founding director and master printer at Raven Fine Arts Editions. Previously, he served as the founding director of the Experimental Printmaking Institute at Lafayette College, where he taught since 1991. In 2015, he received the Anyone Can Fly Foundation Lifetime Achievement Award for expanding the appreciation of fine art printmaking. Renowned artist Faith Ringgold presented this award to him. Curlee is also the director and artist in residence at the David C. Driscoll Center for the Visual Arts and Culture of African Americans and the African Diaspora. They were actually recently the recipients of the Tigger Foundation grant, so congrats on that. Yeah. Okay. And Ify Chiejina is a process-based visual artist born and raised in New York City. Ify identifies as a Black Igbo American female. Her practice is deeply rooted in memory and a strong sense of self and tradition. Ify has a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Queens College and has been in many artist residencies, including Apex Art, where she spent time in the UK, and Curlee Holton's Ravens Edition. Okay, thank you. All right. To get started, I wanted to talk about your experience in the residency and what you two learned about each other.
Well, should I start off?
Yes.
I was first introduced to Ify's work at an exhibition she had at the Banana Factory Gallery in Bethlehem, PA. We both have a shared friend that asked me to come to the show and take a look at the work. And Devin Briggs is her name. And I went to the show and I was really struck by the work. It was they were small pieces for the most part, but they were pieces that were not pursuing a notion of perfection in the work. They were very organic and very, very intimate portraits. And I invited her to my studio, which was about 20 minutes away from Bethlehem, where the exhibition was on, and asked her would she consider coming in and being a resident artist and making a body of work. She was quite intimidated by this. And what she represented for us was opportunity to create works with an emerging artist. We do 3 typical programs with established artists, emerging artists, and then we do sometimes institutional publications for a number of museums and sometimes galleries and collectors. So we were very excited about this possibility, and of course we had to master her name, which was a challenge to make sure we spoke it properly. And she came in, commuted in from New York City to the studio, and we began a process on work on 2 different images of your mother, if I'm not mistaken. Was that of your mother?
They're self-portraits.
Of you?
Mm-hmm.
Really? I thought they were not about age, but I thought they were homage to your mother. Where did I get this about your mother at, anyway? But her mother has played a very important role in her life as an artist. And so we were having dialogue about it, and we decided to do this particular print in 3 different mediums. And I don't think she's ever did any real prints. So this is a piece we did as both a composite of relief printing, serigraph, and collage and collograph. We would do the collagraphs, send them to her in New York, and she would do work on them, send them back to her, and we assembled these pieces. And it's a beautiful piece. I wish I actually had been able to bring it with me. But the goal of Raven Fine Art Editions is to create opportunities for artists in the marketplace, to create works that give them an opportunity to share and broaden their possibilities. And we've done this with a lot of important artists, from Chikai Booker to Sam Gilliam, Faith Ringgold, Elizabeth Catlett. I mean, this goes on and on. And part of the goal, as I mentioned, was to create a unique print that could capture their language, their voice, and make it accessible to the public, because in many cases the paintings, the sculpture was not available to the general public. They could go to an exhibition and see it, read by a catalog or see a video, but they couldn't possess the work. And it was important for us that they could have, the community could have an opportunity to have access to this work. So the community has responded very well to our work. It was challenging and a little intimidating for her, I think, but it's a beautiful piece that is indicative of her work. And I think the other part of it was, as an artist and a producer of prints, I was very attracted to her innocence as an artist and her desire in many ways to reclaim the innocence of her heritage. And as I mentioned before, she was a little worried about me, the conversation, that it might be too, made her a little nervous. But I'm really interested in what is the underpinnings of the motive to make art. Not necessarily the thing that's made, but why is the thing made? Why is the artist devoted to the practice? And I believe it's for one primary reason. It's a solution. The making of the work is a solution, which begs the question, a solution to what? What is the problem that you're solving? And I think in her work, and it connects to some of the other artists that we work with, is finding a way to redeem oneself and one's heritage and the innocence of that heritage and the rituals and practices of that heritage so it could be celebrated and acknowledged publicly.
Thank
What do
you.
you think about that?
Very, very thankful always for your kind words and just the opportunity to work with you and getting to know your team has been such a blessing for me. Even meeting you again for the, well, not the opening reception, but when you came in to see the exhibition and those two pieces that really captivated you, I was always feeling like two, I guess, conflicting or like contrasting emotions of feeling like really excited that you were really interested in those two pieces, and also feeling a little bit like, okay, like those two pieces in particular come from a really deep, challenging experience, and it was like, okay, how do I present this and share this story in such a way where it was just like my whole, most of my practice, I just feel like this innate need to create. And so, and I'm very open about most of the challenges and tribulations that I have experienced and faced. And for those two pieces, that thing around my neck, one, and that thing around my neck, two, I had actually made those pieces after being hospitalized. So I'm someone who struggles with mental distress. And so in order for me to like kind of like navigate all of that experience, or most of that experience, I had to create something visual, I had to write, I had to really process a lot of my experiences, not only what I was going through, but what I saw and witnessed other people go through. And so that whole process of like entering into the space, I was just like, how do I share this story? How do I talk about it in such a way, because it carries so much weight. It's not just what I went through, but it's what other people have went through and continue to go through. So it's like, okay, how do I move this story and bring it into a space where it becomes conversational, and doing it in such a way where it is shedding light on spaces that people aren't familiar with. They might have had an experience, or they might have known someone who does, or they may work in the field. So I saw that as a perfect opportunity to say, okay, I just have to just say it. And I felt very trusted in the space to be able to do so. And I know your daughter was doing the interview. I don't know if Ananda, yeah, I don't know if you were present when she was asking the questions, but Cody was. She was like taking pictures and documenting. And when I shared what I was going through, like it touched her in such a way where I was just like, okay, like it just showed me how important it is to take that chance to speak from a personal place. And whether or not it was something that touched her or touched someone else, I just feel like it's important to take that. I'm a risk taker. Not so much in the sense where I love like heights, because I don't. So I'm very conflicting in that sense. But like even my background in philosophy, like I just like, where was that gonna lead me to? But I just felt so strongly to pursue something that felt so natural for me in a sense. Like one of the earliest conversations I had with my mom. I was just like I loved pink at the time. And I was like, why is pink called pink? And she was just looking at me like, why do you ask these questions? And I was like, but I don't understand. And I was always seeking to understand things, and I understand things best by being a creative. And it just felt so much to get to know you more, get to know Raven's Editions more, work in that space, and really make something that so strongly connected to like the feelings and the thoughts and emotions that I had, because that can also be a struggle and challenge too. Like you have an idea to produce something, and it's like, how do you make something that's very reflective of that experience?
Yeah, but part of the challenge in a workshop is to find a way to take the medium and multiple aspects of the medium, give language and voice to your vision. And I often think of the mind as being a mute, that the mind can't see or speak, and we have to find ways through the art to give voice to the mind, to creativity, and also to create a secure space, a safe space for you. And I remember telling you, don't worry about it, we'll take care of everything, just come, everything will be taken care of. But it made me think about something. When I first had Chikai Booker in the studio, it was an afternoon that Sam Gilliam was also in the studio. And I couldn't get her to make a print. She was so intimidated by the medium. She had never made a print. Or it was because Sam Gilliam was in the studio. I'm not sure which. Because Sam, Sam was just so masterful with mediums. But it took her a while to really get her arms around it. She was intimidated by the medium because the medium, not having that information, can sometimes make you feel vulnerable and exposed. And what we try to do is create a space where you can be that, because we believe that's where the art is going to come from, that space. And we've been very successful in creating that. Actually, the reason I created the workshop was for that very reason, to create space so that individuals from diverse backgrounds could come into a safe space and not have to negotiate that space. I've had international artists come in with no English skills. I've been in different countries with no skills to speak that Japanese or a range of languages, but the thing that is transcendent is creativity and artistic practice, transcends all of that. I would sit at a table and couldn't speak the language. We would make little pictographs while drinking mezcal or tequila. But the point is that it was something that linked all of us together as humans, and to create a space where an artist could come in and do that. And I remember when William T. Williams first came, he was a little nervous about it, and his friend Mel Edwards brought him and said, this is the next place to heaven for an artist, because the space was completely designed. The mission was for the very purpose of that artist to make a work of art. And you were part of that.
I loved every moment of that.
What is it about printmaking that builds a community? Like, what is it about it?
It is a communal practice,
More so than other mediums?
Well, yeah, in the sense that we have 4 people that work for us, so everybody's involved in the process. And as she mentioned, Ananda was interviewing her, Cody was helping her print, Mike was helping assemble the prints, so everybody's involved in this one effort to produce this body of work. And as Robert Rauschenberg would say, that he always created something more when he worked in a print studio with a master printer than he printed on his own, because those voices came to it. It expands your language too. So when she finished her project, it became part of the language of the workshop. So if you have her in as an artist, before long you say, oh, you can try this approach because she tried this approach. So you become part of a larger universal language. So the communal aspect, and of course we know that prints are accessible to larger members of our audience.
In conversation, you also mentioned the use of textiles. Can you please talk about the relationship between printmaking and textiles?
As soon as you mentioned textiles, I instantly thought of the head wraps, which I was just, like that original piece, I did not use any fabrics. And at the time I was producing that piece, I was doing a residency in Staten Island at Snug Harbor. And one person that visited the space was just like, fabrics are so, you have such a connection to fabrics because my mom studied fashion design, and so I grew up watching her make clothing and helping her at some points too. And she was just like, the person visiting was just like, why don't you use fabrics in your work? And for me, fabrics was such a sacred material because my mom, the way she raised me was just like, okay, these are expensive. I'm using it to produce these pieces. And so you can use like the scraps. And I just would like collect all the scraps and like glue or sew them together and then sew them again, like cut them to create dresses for my dolls. And so as soon as she said it, it was like a spark, like a light lit up. And I was just like, oh, I could just buy my own fabric and then I could say what I'm gonna use it for. So then forward, I started implementing fabrics for some pieces. But it was really interesting to be in conversation at the space and just be like, oh, I would love to add fabric. And you were just like, yeah, you could just do that. And I was just like, really? Like, tell me more, because I will do that. And it was just perfect because, like, I think one of the things that we were trying to do, but we weren't so much of like it has to be exactly perfect, is like getting the colors as accurately as possible. And so for getting the fabric to produce the head wraps, I was able to go to a fabric store and I'm like, okay, I can at least looking for colors that's either includes the type of blue or includes like the type of brown. And I found a fabric that had just those two colors. And I was just like, yes, this is just what I needed. This is absolutely perfect. And I love little moments like that where it's just like everything just kind of fits perfectly, because it's not always the case. And then as artists, we just have to figure out a way to solve that, to problem solve. So it was really good for me to be able to, it was a very tedious and long process. I was just like, oh, I can get this done in like 2 weeks. And I think it took me like a month to do it. So it was just a process of having to like cut it into the desired shapes, glue it in such a way. It was just a whole step-by-step process, letting the glue dry, then using an X-Acto knife and cutting it again, then gluing it on. It was like continuously cutting, gluing, then cutting and gluing. And it made me think about, I'm not so versed in the history of the production of fabrics, but just in the sense of like, you have a large surface area and you have the desired pattern, and you have to like go through blocks and like going through the process of like filling in the space and then going back again to add that another second color or that third color. So it's just, I would love to get into that at some point in my life as a person, not just as a creative. Because that's how I see myself sometimes. It's like I speak of that when I talk about things that pertain to arts, the arts, but I see it in ways in which it just incorporates all aspects of me, like me as a thinker, me as someone who studies philosophy, me as someone who likes to read and write, me as someone who tries to cook at times. So I like to see it as like, okay, how can I incorporate these experiences and add that into who I am as a whole person?
Yeah, your question about the communal part of it made me really think about the steps in making this work of art. The first step is we created a lithograph for the tones of the skin on a litho stone. So we printed the tones of the skin, and then we came back and did a silk screen to accent parts of that complexion, highlights on the cheek or the nose. Then we cut a woodcut that would align with it and print a woodcut on top of it. Then we created a collograph, which is a surface that is made by, we use modeling paste, and we created a texture. Then we printed a series of those that was then sent to her so that she could add the fabric element to it. And then came back and had a master bookbinder attach the fabric to the print itself. And then the edges were torn. We didn't want this rectangle because the original piece had torn edges. So this was the first print we ever did like this. So the print is completely irregular and is floated in a shadow box frame. And it's a beautiful piece that stands alone, you know. So it was quite an experience. And as I mentioned, you have 4 different people working on it collaboratively. So this idea of this communal part is, I think, really critical.
So before the two of you met, did you know you had a shared background in philosophy?
No.
No.
Right. Did you have any like philosophical discussions
We
in
had
this whole
one a few
process?
minutes. a few
Yeah,
minutes ago.
because you keep going back to the why you're
Yeah,
making.
yeah.
and-
We were talking about some things a few minutes ago about motives and about the power of a metaphor and creating a metaphor that would hold on to the innocence of your impulse and the redemptive quality of a work of art, how sometimes it is a way in which you redeem yourself from the loss of innocence and living. I don't want to go too far down this road. But,
We have time.
yeah, but
Right.
so, and she was thinking about it, and she was agreeing with some of it, and how we try to find a way through the art to give language to it. And philosophy is, for the most part, pretty much at the basis, is to find a way to describe our existential reality and perhaps even find ways to mitigate what we feel is the dread of that reality. I believe in the wound, that we are wounded by nature. And the goal is to remove that wound, to heal that wound. And art making is a process of healing that wound. I believe we suffer. And how do you alleviate suffering? Now, see, you're getting into this conversation we had.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I started it. I'm
You
sorry.
alleviate part of suffering through consciousness and awareness and becoming strong enough where you can recognize what is happening around you and to you and how you reconcile it and how you liberate yourself from it. And art, for me, has been that. And art, for most of the artists I've worked with and been around, has been the same motives, even if they're unable to articulate the motive. It's the same motive.
There's several things that stuck to me as you were talking, like several words that stuck to me as you were talking, like suffering, nature, and it made me think about like the role of creatives. And like I was listening to something or maybe reading something that was saying that there's so much chaos in the world, and as creatives we help to bring or establish a type of order or restoration. And it made me think a lot about, like I started questioning or trying to go deeper within, like, why do I make the works that I make? Or why do I feel moved to go about doing things in the way that I do? And I was telling Curlee before this that I had entered into a period where I just wasn't communicating much with anyone. Like I just needed to be alone with my thoughts and feel really confident in what is coming about. And even if I felt a little bit of like questioning or doubtful of it, I just needed to sit longer with it, because eventually I'll find or I'll see something that helps me move forward with that idea. And so I was thinking a lot about my upbringing, not just culturally, like where my parents come from, where my parents come from, but also just in terms of like how I was raised and like the kind of household I grew up in. And like I think about my relationship with my mom, who's been deceased for a few years now. I think about the relationship with my siblings. I think about the relationship with my dad. And through each of it, my relationship with them has always, like, I just love being able to provide a type of ease and comfort to others, not just my family, but to anyone. But when I was thinking specifically about the relationships that I have with my family, I just thought of like, and in that we all help each other. So it's like my older brother has a developmental disorder. And so there's a limitation into like how much he can understand and learn. But he loves the arts. I think he visits the art galleries more than I do. And I'm an artist. And I frequent them as best as I can, but he goes maybe 3 times a week. And he just stores so many photos on his phone. And it's like, and I go to his room and it's like his side of it is just collection of like collages that he makes and drawings that he makes and collections of books and cutting out images that he likes. And it's like being able to just exchange information with him, despite the fact that even with his level of understanding being limited, it's just being able to provide a type of comfort for him where when it comes to something else in his life, he's like, oh, I need to speak to Ify. Like, I know that I can confide things in her. And being able to pick up on that, like noticing the things that I'm good at, as well as noticing the things that maybe I'm not interested or not good at, has also been important for me too. But in focusing on the things that I have been able to see that I'm good at, I just put more of an emphasis and energy onto that, and I just see that as what has been able to carry me as an artist. Like, I like being able to dig deep within myself to solve problems, my own problems, so that I can also shed light into other possibilities for other people to solve their own problems
So that
too.
particular becomes universal.
Universal, yeah. And I was thinking about that like yesterday. I was like, I haven't, like, and that's so metaphysics.
Yeah.
And I was like, I haven't done a deep dive into that
Sure.
in so long. But I just kept thinking about that. I was just like, all right, like, for me, like, and I've been doing a lot of reading and writing lately. And so I'm like, okay, I start off with like the I, like the I starts off the sentence. And I'm like, how do I get from this place, something that's so particular, something that's so specific, and then gravitate into something that's more universal, which involves a lot of crossing things out and like constantly writing and thinking, and then being in conversation with others, and just being like, okay, like, I've looked through this and feeling the need to just share it and see what happens. Even if I say something that's not correct, or I didn't include something, to be more forgiving with myself in the process, because I feel like that's, at least for me personally, that's the best way to truly examine and truly learn and communicate in the world, even if it's not so popular.
Well, I think that's what the art gives us, whether we're a curator, whether we're a visual artist, a performer, singer, dancer, is it gives us a way in which we can mitigate the realities of the world, to negotiate that world, to speak about that world, to reflect on that world. Whether you put the exhibition together, where you describe a work of art, you're actually engaged in your relationship to the world. How do you relate to the world? And I relate to the world through these works of art. And I make it can be a gallerist, it doesn't matter, you know, it's how do you relate to the world and define your relation through your engagement with the creative forces in the world, whether it's an existing work. The example is the work of Charles White. The work of Charles White is just, takes your breath away, you know, when you think about his work and his own life. So the work transcends him, and it becomes something that we can embrace and maybe answer some of our own questions that we're unable to answer. And I've always believed that we're so fortunate to be artists or in the arts, because most people don't have a chance to even reflect on the world that they're experiencing. Agreed. And we're blessed to have that.
Agreed. There is something that I was listening to that I feel kind of resonates to that, which I try to understand. Even though I have my own positions, I try to do the best as I can to understand other positions as well. And there was something I was listening to where the person was saying that, and this was so big during isolation during the pandemic, where it was just like the whole phrase of like hustle culture, or like reinventing yourself. And the person I was listening to was saying that, yes, that's very important, that's very essential, but so many people don't have that opportunity to do so, because they're thinking about, how am I going to pay my bills, or like, how am I going to take care of my kids, or like, this is such a travesty, this has certainly uprooted everything that I had planned for myself. How am I going to survive? And some people were able to reinvent themselves and had the space and opportunity to shift, and to shift in a way where it led to them moving forward in the way that they desired. But for others, they didn't have that opportunity. And so it's like, I thought about that a lot, because, you know, like, as someone who like loves reading existential things and like how to improve the self and how to examine the self, I was very much like, yes, I agree, like, it's time to reinvent this would be the perfect time to reinvent. But knowing people on a personal level and knowing where the challenges that they were experiencing, I'm like, how can I take this information and extend it out to include them? And even if they're not in the position to do so, and I might be able to, how can I then produce and do something that also benefits them too and doesn't leave them behind? because it's what I was seeing so much is like, how can I reinvent myself for me and me alone? And that's where I was just like, all right, I'm someone it's very hard for me to really dislike something, because I try to see like different sides to it, even if I don't agree to it. So it's just like, how can shedding light into something that maybe people are not necessarily aware of.
It made me think of something. I have grandchildren, and I have a granddaughter that I spend a lot of time with, who's 7 years old. And often I'll ask her to do something, clean up her room or do something, and she'll say, why? And you know, you want to tell them, stop saying why, just go do it, you know? But then you realize that why should be asked more often, and adults should ask why. And there should be an answer to why does this exist this way? Why did you say that to me? Why are you behaving this way? We don't ask why enough, and you made me think about that. Why?
Why?
¿Por qué?
Yeah.
So speaking of why and questions, I wanted to open the floor to see if any of you all had questions.
This is like a Greek symposium, so this is, I think this is a Socratic dialogue. So if you have some questions, these are the people who can engage with you on them. Any questions? Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm Valerie Francis from Nowhere Art Gallery, and the space is in Martha's Vineyard. And I'm honored to be here because it's been a dream, certainly, to meet you, Dr. Holton and Ify. We got a chance to meet each other last week. Printmaking is actually my first love as an artist. I did not practice it in my professional world, but one of the things I have been struggling with now as a gallerist and a steward of art is making sure that it holds its place as we all move into this digital space. And so I wondered how you both might address that as artists and as printers.
Well, in my practice in the studio, I have a saying that the digital is a gorilla that needs to be chained to the wall. We use the digital technology to create a mock-up or a scaled version for the publisher, but we don't produce digital prints. I'm really adamant about this because the process of a fine print is the hand is involved, the mark is made, the scratches on the hand, the cuts on the hand from making this object. And it can be made as a multiple so that more than one person can own it. But it's embossed, it's textured. I go up to prints and I smell them sometimes or touch them. Or I'll see a print that's presented that is not what it is. You know, they say, well, that's a lithograph, and it's not a lithograph. And I'll teach the gallery owner, and I've done this at art fairs, let me tell you how you have this mislabeled, you know. So it is a practice, a serious practice that's archival, that has a long tradition and an important value. And I think that must be sustained. So I don't believe a digital, the argument is that a digital is the same as a fine print. It is not. I'm not saying a digital doesn't have any relevance, but don't mistake it as the same thing. And it's my role to make sure you understand it is not. So I'm telling you about an experience. I went to an art exhibition at the Banana Factory, and I walked into an artist studio. They have art studios upstairs, and I buy art too. So I saw this beautiful little painting on the wall, and I said, I want to buy this painting. He said, it's not a painting, it's a digital reproduction. I mean, even have brush strokes. You know, of course, if you got close to it with a loop, you could see. I said, this is a lie. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I was still a professor at Lafayette. I said, we're going to host a symposium on the lie of art, and I want you to come and talk about this lie. Because this was a lie. This thing on the wall you have is a lie. It's not the truth. So he was presenting what I could think was a painting. It was a lie. So I'm still not gotten over that. And that's been 10 years ago, and I haven't gotten over it. So I don't mistake them. And I explained this to William T. Williams up at Yale once. We were up there doing a talk, and they had acquired some works from the print studio. And we were talking about this argument. I said, okay, William T., just go over there to the monitor, do a little design, and let's go to lunch. Tell it how many to print, 30, and let's go to lunch, and they'll be in the tray when we get back. That's not art. That's a facsimile. It's not art.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The word hope comes to mind. I was reading something, and it was pertaining to drawing, but I feel like it resonates with all art forms, is that when the work is being produced, so much hope is involved in like hoping that, you know, I have the skills to create this piece, or I have the tools, or even with the mistakes and the flaws, I'm still able to execute. And that just feels missing to me in anything, or in most things that are digital, especially in thinking about this catastrophe that's coming with AI. It just feels that, I mean, yes, it is changing a lot of things, and it will continue to change things, but I also think that there is an opportunity for almost like a second like rebirth or a type of renaissance, because there is a desire, I feel like there's a strong desire for things that are more heartfelt, especially in other conversations about like, a lot of people are experiencing like job loss, or loneliness is on the rise, which that's a topic that I wasn't even versed on until like a few days ago. And I just feel that there's more, even with like the surge of AI things and the things that are digital, I just feel like there's still an opportunity to be rooted in things that are very heartfelt. And so I hope just resonates a lot more.
And let me clarify something. I have this attitude about digital. I'm not suggesting that an artist can't make an effective work of art through a digital process. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just talking about my own aesthetic principles. You got to understand where I came from. I came from, my art gods were Bob Blackburn, and I can go down the list. So I have this bias about it. I was at an art fair 2 years ago, and I'm doing a talk about fine prints with a group of appraisers. And NFTs came up in the conversation. And I told them I had no interest in NFTs, you know. And someone in the audience began to tell me how much money they had made off of them, the process, and kept asking me to accept them as fine art. And I wouldn't do it. I said, you know, you have to talk to someone else about that. I have no interest in it. The panel discussion ended, and I was walking away. This guy followed me around the art fair, wanting me to validate NFTs. You have to say they're good because you have this credibility. Just to show you how this is operating. You know, I was going to call it. I mean, this was pursuit. You know, he was after me to put a stamp imprimatur on this, to stamp it. So
Art
anyway.
and money. Any other questions along that line, or any other?
Well, firstly, I think this is a very good dialogue. Thank you. It's very warm, and it's loving, and critical thinking, all the above. And well, I'm just picking up on one theme that you just mentioned, of hope. So there's so many ingredients, really, that you have raised in this conversation. And so I want to ask the artist, because your question about the nature of community when you are working together in collaboration, and whether, and of course I have very strong feelings about that and enthusiasm about as soon as I step into a printmaking workshop, this is the way how I'm not an artist, but that's how I respond, because I'm aware of that sense of community. And in your case, had you had that experience before working as, or was this no, I'm not saying necessarily a singular experience, but did it raise a different potential for you?
Yes. Yes, very much so. That was the first time I was able to produce and translate work in such a way. And I've always had the desire of, like, because I acknowledge that there are certain things I can do, and there's a lot of things that I can't do. And because, like, I used to think that, like, okay, the things I can't do, I just have to learn all these things. And I could go that route for some things I do. But then when I look up and I see that, oh, such and such person can do this, another person can do that, it's just like, it's quite easy to just start that conversation. Doesn't necessarily mean that that collaboration is going to happen, but to just have that conversation and throw yourself out there. So, and working with Ravens Editions and working with Curlee, it just gave me so much potential to do more, as opposed to thinking that, like, oh, how can I do this? How can I then do that? It's just like, okay, I know of someone who does that, who has a skill set. I know of someone who dances. I know of someone who does animation. I know someone who writes books. It's like, why not collaborate with them and extend that invitation and not just keep everything closed within myself of things I have to learn how to do.
Well, thank you so much, you two, for being here. And thank you for everyone for coming, and Linda and Claudia. Yeah, thank you.
And we thank the Petrucci Collection and Claudia for making this happen, this dialogue.
Thanks to all of you for coming tonight. We have another program at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And if you haven't already heard the fabulous news, we are extending until June 10th. We will take a hiatus from programming next week, and then we'll start again on the 1st of June, and our dates will change. Our dates will change. The days that we're open will change from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the cherry on top is we have a party this Saturday, which was supposed to be the closing, but now has been reconfigured in our minds to be the great celebration of the extension. So please come, bring your friends. It's going to be 4 to 8 on Saturday right here in this location, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much, and another hand for the panel.